Hello and welcome to another late night talk. My guest this evening is PL Stuart. Good evening, good afternoon, and wherever people are in the world, hello. How are you
Hello,
doing?
everyone.
How are you doing?
Uh, I'm awesome. Stephen, thank you so much for having me. I'm very honored to be here.
Of course, my pleasure, my pleasure. So, like I do with all these interviews, let's go back to the beginning and talk about what kind of stuff were you watching, reading when you were growing up that fed as early influences on your path to becoming a writer.
Wow, so many things.
Mm,
A lot of the classic stuff that a lot of people read, C.S. Lewis, Chronicles of Narnia, Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, Lord Alexander, Chronicles of Prydian, and me being a weird, nerdy geek, at an early age, a lot of the classical stuff, the Iliad, the Odyssey, the Aeneid, Paradise Lost, and then, of
hmm
course, later on in school, getting to university, taking medieval literature with a minor in history, it just morphed into that. And then from there, I got out of reading fantasy for a long time. I
Really?
was reading for a long time, and a lot of just because of my job, because I'm in law enforcement. I didn't have a lot of time to read. I was raising a young family, but when I did read, it was pure escapism, which really wasn't because I'm so silly. I'd be reading police procedurals, murder mysteries, and thrillers. So it really was escapism. I was just, I maybe re-traumatizing myself. Maybe I got a kick out of that because that's what I was doing. But anyways, I got away from a long time, and then later on, kids got older, and I was in a different headspace. And with my lovely wife Deb, love you very much if you're watching, who is now essentially my business manager. I had gotten into reading again, and I had picked up specifically Miles Cameron's Trader Sun Cycle, and
Ah, interesting.
uh, and it is one of my favorite series of all time. And I just remember reading that, being so immersed and saying, I've also wanted to write a fantasy book. I want to write something like that. Something you can get totally lost in,
hmm
something with the depths and the nuances. And Miles Cameron, it's funny now that, we're friends. I remember going to his house for a barbecue back. And, I mean, obviously, as a lot of you know, he's a world famous reenactor. He
Mm.
travels all over the world, and he's got all the swords, and we're out there, my wife and I, and we're using the swords, and he's got the armor and everything, and I'm just like, wow, this is surreal, but he lives it. It's so authentic when he writes it, and he's a phenomenal writer. He's an extremely prolific writer, but he's
Yes.
written in multiple genres: sci-fi, historical fiction, fantasy,
Did he do Crime with
and
his father as well? Him and his father
yeah,
did books together for years, telling
yes,
me if I spoke to him.
yeah, he's a wonderful guy. I call him the most interesting man in the world because
Yes, fairly.
he's been in NCS, like the real
Yes.
NCIS, not the TV show. Like he's been an intelligence officer. The guy's he's done a little bit of
He's
everything. Anyways, my
lived.
point is,
He's lived a life.
yeah. But Trader Side Cycle, that was, and then I was getting close to 50, was like 50, and I was like, you know what? I better get on this. Like half my life is over. I better start. I've never read a book before. I've always wanted to. I better get on this.
Okay.
So yeah. But in terms of story, and I've rambled here.
No, it's
But
fine.
to
This is
answer,
good. Good.
yeah, but to answer your early question, yeah, I grew up on a lot of the classical stuff. I can name so many books. I read probably at an age where maybe I shouldn't have been. Thomas Chronicles of Thomas Covenant by Stephen R.
Mm,
Dawson. That was a huge influence on me. I know a lot of people bounce off that book, understandably, because of certain themes and a
yes.
scene, particularly.
Yep.
Uh, but yeah, I voraciously read fantasy when I was younger, and it's funny. I got away for it for so long, but came right back, and now that's pretty well exclusively all I read is science fiction and fantasy. So
Yeah, I think I'm one of the few that probably just kept reading all the way through. I read a lot of the similar sort of things as you growing up, Lewis and Tolkien and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I just kept plowing through. Um, and just yeah, Miles is a fantastic writer, as you say. He's done so many different types of things, and the fact that I love his. For those who don't know, he does writing, fighting, which he does on Twitter. These short videos, like 40 seconds, 50 seconds, a minute, where he talks about certain things like how would you fight spear and shield against a sword, and who would win, and how would it work, and he shows you because as PL said, he lives this. He's done it. He's got the armor. He's got the weapons. He can literally show you how it would work and what would win depending on history. So if you need information on how authentic weapons would work, he's the guy to go to say, who would win if we had this versus that? Yeah, he is the man to know. But yes, he came over to a UK convention a couple of times the last few years, so I've met him in person. So, of course, I don't know if he's coming to Worldcon this year. I think he is. Are you coming as?
Yeah, he said he is, and I remember. I don't remember who you were chatting with. It was on Twitter. I can't remember who was saying what, but I remember you were saying it was. I think it was Ryan. It
Yeah.
was Ryan Cahill. I'm not sure. And you're saying, "Yep, look for us in the pub or something like that." And like, yeah, a lot of people I know. It sounds like it's going to be a big reunion, and not a reunion of people who have only met virtually, but are now
Yes.
potentially going to meet. That's going to be wild. So
This
I
is
can't
so
wait.
weird. Like I've known a lot of these people for 5, 6, 7, 10 years. I've never met them in person because they live on the other side of the world. So going to Glasgow Worldcon is going to be phenomenal. A 5-minute journey walking will take like an hour because I'll just keep bumping into people at this rate. I can't wait.
Okay.
It's going to be fantastic. So yeah, that's in August for those who don't know in Glasgow. So you decided to start writing your own book. Did you immediately go, I'm going to write a 7-book series, or were there other things before you got to the Drowned Kingdom Saga?
Yeah, I know I'm crazy that way, Stefan. So this is what happened. I wrote when I decided I was going to write this thing. I wrote this tome, and it probably came up to well over probably 250,000, 300,000 words. This massive thing.
Right.
And when you're still you're somewhat naive to how things work. You're a novice in the industry. You don't understand marketing. You don't understand publishing. You don't understand what works and what doesn't. But I pride myself as being someone that try to do my homework. I have my wife, of course, who is brilliant and has a marketing background. And we started doing some research, and we're like, well, no one's going to read that from a novice indie author. So maybe writing the equivalent, probably mass market paperback, a 1,400, 1,500 page book is probably not going to work. So, and I was like, well, what if I chopped it up into, a bunch of books, 5, 6, 7 books? And she's like, okay, well, that might work. I'm like, yeah. So then I started doing research about the fact that series typically seem to do well. Not that standalones don't, but that if you have a series, especially long series, the first book, although your first book will always be the best sold, because some people will take a pass after the first book, but others who like it will continue to read, and if they like the second, third book, they're probably in for the whole series. So I said, you know what, let's do that. So I chopped it up into essentially 7 books, but I had so much more planned in the universe. I had 3 prequel trilogies planned.
Wow,
I had a subsequent 7-book series planned to follow up where this 7-book series left off. So I said, okay, I'm starting late. I'm going to be in my 50s when I publish, and if I'm lucky, and God bless me with a long life and the mental faculties to write.
Yes.
I've seen a lot of writers being able to write into their 80s. So if I'm lucky and everything breaks well, I could write to my 80s. So that means I could potentially get maybe 30 books out if I write consistently. And my commitment was always, and I hate talking about this, but I can't help it. It comes up all the time.
Go on.
And it feels like we're picking on people, but let's just call it what it is. I became aware of I call it the GRM/Rothfuss effect. In that, a lot of readers feel that they've been burned by very popular, worldwide renowned authors who are brilliant and who've written these series and have not published a subsequent book in the series. They've basically stopped, and nothing's been seen for years. And a lot of readers have been frustrated with that, fantasy readers, and they've said, you know what? If you're a new author and you're writing a series, especially you tell me it's 4, 5, 6 books, maybe I'll check on you. Maybe when you get to book 4 or 5, I might invest. But until I see you can prove to me that you are going to put out a book in a timely fashion, in a consistent basis, I'm not buying it. So, and I've had people message me or post publicly on socials that, you know what, PL, I've always been interested in series, but what book are you on now? And, I've made a commitment to write a book every year in the series. So far, I've kept that. Drowned Kingdom was published in 2021. The Last of Us Delights in 2022. Lord and King 2023. And now, my most recent book, Alliance Pride, just got released. And if you forgive me the indulgence, it's upside down.
There it is.
There you go. Alliance Pride out in 2023. 2024. So, and I'm working on book 5, A Pack of Wolves, for 2025. I'm doing my best. You know, I'm not perfect, but I have managed to deliver on that commitment. And God willing, as long as I don't get hit by a bus or something, book 5 will be out in 2025. Book 6 in 2026, and the conclusion in 2027. So, yeah. So part of that whole thing, again, another tangent, but that's why it's a 7-book series.
You're right though. The fact that you've delivered more books in your series than so one person, Mr. Rothfuss, has in his entire series so far. So you've done better than him. You've promised a 7-book series and you've delivered 4 in 4 years. So some readers are just unwilling to think about that kind of stuff, that it is only a couple of authors. I've done a book a year every year since I've been published. I've finished 2 trilogies completely, a duology, and the first one of the new trilogies out. 2 and 3 are already written. They are going to come out this year and next year. So I've got nearly a decade of publishing history, and I still get people saying, oh, well, I've read Judas, but I'm not sure. I'm going to wait till you finish the trilogy. I'm like, so it is unfortunate that a couple of bad apples in some ways, there's lots of reasons why I understand that, but technically it's kind of affected all of us unfairly in the industry, I think, which is not very good, but we just have to keep delivering on time the best we can, and hopefully that will prove to people that we can, deliver books. So you decided to go straight into the deep end by having a 7-book series, not starting off easy with like a trilogy.
No,
that would be too easy. Who would do that? But so you must have planned this. The fact that you said you've got other books in the world that you want to do and a follow-on series. How long did it take you when you were planning to write this what became a 7-book series?
Well, this sounds crazy, and again, I am a bit off. That's okay.
I think we all are. It's okay.
Yeah, writers. You have to be a bit.
You have to be
to do this. You have to be a bit.
Yeah.
But this may sound, and I'm not trying to boast, and perhaps it sounds obsessive, but Stephen, everything's planned. The titles of all the books are planned. The back cover blurbs are planned. The cover art is planned. The plots are planned. The characters are all laid out. Everything is planned out for all 20. It's all planned out. It was planned out from the beginning.
Yeah.
So, and it lives in my head, of course, as you know, these things live in your head. So, and for me, and perhaps that is obsessive. However, what it does is, and not, I don't want to give the impression, not every single thing is completely resolved. Like there are some side plots and some other characters, and you know how it is. I've talked about this before, that you may have a character that initially seems like a minor character, and they simply demand agency and go, I need more page time, and that's it, and that's what happens. It's a weird phenomenon, and that's happened to me in my series. So never say never, but for the most part, all the major plot threads, everything has gone exactly as I planned out for the most part. So, but for me, having, as an independent author, having those details, it's not that I leave myself with zero room for flexibility, but having those plans and those details laid out, just for me, it's I know it's all psychological, but it frees me. It allows me to not think about that.
Yeah.
And I just focus on writing, right? Because I mean, I feel like that minutia, while it's important, it's not something I want to focus on. And it's not something I want to keep me, oh my God, what's the cover going to be? I don't know if I can find a theme to match cover. Because I find a lot of my friends, that's what trips them up. They get the book written and it's like, oh, okay. I don't know if, and they'll go back and forth. And that's all good stuff. That's all part of the excitement and the fun of being an author too. But I don't want those details to distract me. I want that taken care of. I go out ahead of time, for example, to pick supportive people whose opinions I respect, to get cover endorsements for the blurbs. I have 4 for each book, and I already reached out to the people I want to endorse book 7. Right, they're already selected, right? So those details are I take care of those ahead of time, and I feel that frees me up mentally, emotionally, to just focus on the writing.
Yeah, I plan my books to a degree, and I think it works for me too. I don't need to think about right, I finish a chapter and I sit down the next day to start the next chapter. I'm thinking, where am I going? Because the roadmap is there. I've got the details. I know. And like you, there is some flexibility. I don't know everything, but I've got the main beats of the chapter. And then I start writing it, and the conversations can flex and change, and little things could creep in that could be added in. But it frees me up as well. I don't need to worry about, all right, I'm going to spend an hour thinking about this chapter. Right. And then you might spend half an hour writing it, and then that's the only time you got for writing in the day, maybe. It's like you've wasted it. So yeah, I think for me it works. As other people don't do that, that's fine. Whatever works for you. I always say there's no right way, there's only what works for you. But yeah, it frees me up. And I think the ultimate person who has this is Sanderson, because he has like other aspects of his life, like everything freed up. Like I'm sure someone takes care of, I don't know, doing
Yes.
the grocery shopping and doing his washing and ironing his t-shirts or whatever it might be. But it's just another thing in your mind. You're kind of thinking, oh, I've got to pick up the kids from school, right? I've got to get cat food today. Yeah. If that's kind of just like taken away, you have more time in your mind for creative thinking and pondering and thinking, oh, I could do that. I could play with this. And I mean, I'm not sure I want to get to like everything taken care of, but a bit more headspace, I think is a good thing for me. So I could focus more on, building in my mind.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So tell me about the world within the Drowned Kingdom. Tell me the seeds of the idea, where it started from, and then how you grew it out into this epic saga, essentially.
Well, there was a few elements,
Mhm.
probably three main ones. One, I have been fascinated since I was very young with Plato's tale of the lost realm of Atlantis. I think it is just it's timeless, obviously, and it just the idea that right now, Stephen, out there right now, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people actually searching actively to ascertain if Atlantis exists. Something that for most scholars would say it was a fable, it never existed.
Mm.
However, there's some that believe that it did, and there's actually people out there still believing that it existed and actively searching for it. So I just think that it's just one of those things that has captivated me and enthralled me and made me want to do something and that write something in the family's fantasy sphere, specifically about Atlantis. So I always want to write a tale about that. Obviously, it's my version. I'd like to think I stayed true to many of the elements
Mm.
of Plato's tale, however, my own twist on it. I didn't get too inventive with certain things. For example, Atlantis, I call my realm Atalantics. I mean, there's reasons for that, but it doesn't sound that inventive. But I do have my reasons for that, more spoilery. But so that was number one. I want to write a tale about this. Number two, I want to write something that addressed and made me something, not to give answers because you can't provide answers, certainly not me. I'm not smart enough to worldwide issues that have plagued and troubled humankind for years, but I want to write something to address my thought processes, my angst, my turmoil, my how I coped with things that over the years are themes that bother me, like racism, homophobia, colonialism, misogyny, a bunch of things. Like why do these problems exist? What could we do about them? How did they start? How did the ideas germinate? What can you do with people who feel that way? How would it be from the perspective of someone who felt that way? Could they change? To what degree could they change? What would that change look like? So I want to write that from the perspective of actually someone who could potentially go through an evolution.
Mm.
So that was the second thing. And the third thing was I mentioned Miles Cameron and all. You asked me the question about the influences. So I want to write something that felt like classic, very classic type fantasy.
Mhm.
Something that harkened back to the classics, to the Lords of the Rings, to the Iliad and the Odyssey and the Lloyd Alexanders and the Lewises. And I wanted that
Mm.
not antiquated or archaic prose necessarily, but I wanted you to feel that this is very much tied to an ancient past that I was writing about something that actually happened, as if it were almost quasi-historical fiction. So I wanted something somewhat grounded in reality, but with these sprinkles of magical, like magical realism. So I wanted those three big pieces: Atlantis, the tough, compelling themes, and the kind of ancient feeling. I want to put all that together to make a series. So that's what I threw all those ingredients in the pot, stirred it up, and that's what we get.
The tale of Atlantis is an intriguing mystery, and I think sometimes we can look at some of the mysteries in the past and just disregard them as myth. But with modern science and modern things, we can think back in terms of plates shifting, seas rising now. Certain islands are going to disappear because of global warming, and they're going to be underwater, and the tides are going to rise and eradicate certain parts of the world. And so you start thinking of, well, what if the tectonic plates shifted and the seas changed and it could have buried something? So Atlantis could have been a real place that was just effectively buried by changing the world, that now we could sort of explain with science. But 3,000, 4,000 years ago, it would appear as the wrath of the gods, or just this random mystery that's completely unexplainable, or, visitors from another world, whatever it might be. So, yeah, there's always some myths, I think, have a lot of them have some kind of seed of truth to them that, might be able to uncover. So there's no reason it couldn't have existed, you know. So where
Yeah, you
did
never know.
Yeah. So whereabouts in your world does the tale of and the myth of the idea of Atlantis, or Atalantics, as you call it, where does it come in your building? How do people view this kind of mysterious or lost land?
Well, so just to give a bit of a preface for that. So, my version of Atlantis is that's what you first see in the Drowned Kingdom Saga. That's the first setting that you are a part of, essentially, for the most part. I mean, it doesn't appear right away, but that is the protagonist originates from them, and he gives you quite a healthy dose about what his society is like. What it looks like physically, the geography, down to the last detail. He tells you pretty well this what it is like, the stance of their people. There's colonial superpower that controls, essentially their part of the known world through their military, through the naval supremacy. They're colonialists. They take the playbook of most colonialists, where they subjugate, they impose their religion and their will over others. They bury the other culture, sweep it aside, and they impose their dominance. So, now, what happens is, no spoiler here, because it's the Drowned Kingdom Saga, and
The
I
name
sit
kind of
right in
gives
the
you some clues as to what's going on.
yeah, on the back cover blurb, like Atlantis
It's not a
6.
spoiler. It's
Okay,
not a spoiler. Yeah.
yeah. So the tale really is as well about this main flawed character, this flawed, bigoted, insecure, messed up, but in some ways very competent character, who leads the last remnants of the Atlanteans across the sea to this new continent. And he essentially wants to recreate Atlantics. He wants to reestablish their dominance, take over, rule all, and that's his playbook. So you really get to see. Not only do you get introduced to what Atlantis physically looks like. Again, I talked about geography, the flora, the fauna, you name it, the people who live there, what the cities look like, the culture, the language, their history, especially in the context of them being this big colonial superpower. You get a sense of where they fit in the overall history, and the fact that they're also not trusted, because people know their playbook. They know that they're the type of kingdom that will make allies and betray them, all for the sake of maintaining this dominance. And you also, I think there's a real sense of setting there, and then, of course, you get to know Atlantics fairly intimately for the first of the book, and then it's gone, it's wiped out, and we start anew. But however, throughout the Drowned Kingdom saga, you're always brought back to Atlantis in terms of what the characters say about it and how it relates, the webs of what happened in Atlantis and why it was destroyed, all the splinters are spread throughout the entire saga. So
And it's quite an interesting shift and dynamic then to have this thing that is this global power that's suddenly shattered and they've lost their central base essentially. And now it's a case of people know what they're like, but it's no longer a case of they're the power that they once were, and now suddenly they're strangers in a strange land trying to recreate something. That's going to create a lot of conflict, and perhaps they can't back it up in the way that they once could, and that's going to create even more problems for them. And religious culture clashes as well between cultures is very common with former superpowers and colonizers, as we know from our world history. So were you borrowing lots of things and looking at our history and back of the classics as well, rather than fantasy books in particular?
oh yes, it's very much. I'm also a huge historical fiction reader, and of course, as I said, I majored in medieval literature with a minor in history in university, and I find it fascinating. I mean, when you look at name your global empire, whether it's the Aztecs, the Roman Empire, the British Empire, uh, there's every empire you can potentially think about throughout history. There's a playbook, and it's a successful playbook for the most part in terms of what they've managed to accomplish. And I think it's something that's hard to portray in terms of you want to appreciate and value the positives about
Mm.
about those, but also look at the negatives and the drawbacks with a very candid, clear-eyed lens that this is not all good, especially with the people that are
Yeah.
put under heel.
Mm-hmm.
So, so despite any technological advances, despite advances in medicine, despite all these great things that potentially this can bring, there is a very dark and deep downside that it's a steep slope for us. Well, especially the people who are at the mercy of. So I wanted to, and that's all drawn from real history. I mean, I don't need to elaborate there. I think most of us, understand that, especially in the 21st century. That's a very very poignant theme that is near and dear to a lot of people's hearts, and
Mm-hmm.
that I think in the 21st century we're a lot more aware and sensitive to that aspect when it comes to colonialism and religious persecution and bigotry and things such as that, right? So, but I want to basically shine a light on that with a very, again, gloves off viewpoint, and from someone who's doing the oppression and the colonizing.
Yeah, there's parallels between your series and my new one, which is about the Mongol Empire. And of course, that's it's the same sort of thing. So one of the things I found the most tricky to get the balance right is that one of the points of view in the Judas Blossom and the trilogy is from the oppressors. It's not just the people being oppressed fighting back with the rebels, it's the oppressors. But I'm trying to make the character feel real and not just they did terrible things. History knows, we know this, but equally they have to be rounded individuals and feel, for all their flaws, like people that they care about something. They're not just constantly killing people all the time every day. So did you struggle with that with your Atlantean characters, as other people viewing them as monsters and terrors and colonizers, but equally you're trying to portray them as people at the same time? Was that a challenge for you?
Frankly, Stefan, it wasn't. And I think, and I'm not saying this to boast, I'm thinking because of my life experience, the things I've seen as someone who's racialized, the things I've seen as a law enforcement officer, I think and the things I've read or tried to educate myself, the things I've learned from other people,
Mm.
I think that was actually the easiest part to write, but the hardest thing was perhaps making some people understand why I was doing it, and to do it and to respond to criticisms about how I was doing it. I'm thankful that overall I feel it's been very well received for the most part, and that I think people understand that I tried to approach it as sensitively as I could.
Mm.
Um, but I also know that it's a theme that's tough to accept. It's funny when I talk about these themes. You know what? In fantasy, I always say most readers, a lot of readers, not all, I mean, I don't want to generalize here, but a lot of readers can read, pages and pages of blood and gore and people being eviscerated and beheaded and battles, blah, blah, blah. But talk about colonialism and racism, that's religious persecution,
Hmm.
it's a subject that is even more sensitive. And because, frankly, let's face it, in some ways, we a lot of us have become desensitized to reading about this massive battle scene where people are split in two, and it's thrilling, and it's like, yeah, and but then it's hard to talk about bigotry, right? Or to see that on a page.
Yep.
So I think that was the hard part. But I feel that people understand now, after 4 books, I've just published the fourth, the fifth is coming out next year, that where I'm going with things, why I've written things the way I have. And for a lot of people, I think they found the main character, especially because it's first person for the most part. You're in this character's head. There is there's absolutely zero doubt about how he feels about things, but he goes through a journey, and it's an evolution, and in some things he gains wisdom and starts to accept things and change to a certain degree. But it's not instantaneous, because I've also thought that's not realistic. People don't just turn around, oh, I've changed and that's it. It doesn't work like that, right?
No.
So it's gonna be frustrating for a lot of people to read this character, because he backslides. He takes 10 steps forward and 10 steps back. He starts to change his views on one thing, and then he pivots. And of course, there are other considerations. He is a royal and he's a leader. And some things are done politically, not because he doesn't believe in some things, because he thinks that's the most politically advantageous thing to do, or for him to maintain power, or for his people to survive, or so it's not even just about decisions he makes. Sometimes they're very pragmatic.
Mm.
So it's a tough position for him to be in. And I also want to portray the fact that it's not easy to be a leader. It's not easy to be a CEO of a company. It's not easy to be a team leader of a group. It's not easy to be a leader of any type. And being in the context of an ancient ruler, it wasn't easy. You write about you're someone who writes about that, and I must say, I absolutely love the Judas Blossom. It's fantastic. Love the Coward as well. I have to read the rest of your book. Love the Coward. This is one of my faves. One of my faves.
Thanks.
But you're someone, and many authors who I love their writing. You know, when you lead a group of people, especially a large group of people, there's a lot of conflicting things you have to manage,
Mm.
right? If you're the CEO of a company, for example, do your primary responsibility is about making sure the shareholders are it's profitable for them.
Yep.
Are you going to protect the environment for the sake of potentially being more profitable? Are you going to do those certain ethical things that morally you would do, whereas you have these other responsibilities that may conflict with them? What are you going to do when it push comes to shove, right? So I want to portray that in my book.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. You're right. People have become desensitized to violence in particular. There are certain things that people are not comfortable viewing. There's a website called Does the Dog Die, where you can put in a name of a film and it'll tell you whether or not the dog dies. Because some people are uncomfortable with animal cruelty, which I am absolutely as well. But equally, they'll watch a film where 1,000 people are slaughtered, but if they kill the dog, I'm not going to watch it. So there's this, and talking about more sensitive subjects like religion, race, bigotry, these kind of things, some people makes them very, very uncomfortable. Um, but then again, science fiction and fantasy has always talked about these things. It's not new for some people to be surprised by this. I find it incredibly puzzling. Like, some are more subtle than others. Some authors are when they're talking about particular themes, and some just talk about it very much up front. But I don't understand why some readers now seem to be stumbling over these things as if they're brand new, or maybe they're just new to the genre and they don't understand the history of the genre.
Yeah, but at the same time, I understand that, and I totally understand, respect that some people just don't want to read about that stuff because they live it. Some people don't want to read about it because they read for escapism, and they don't
Mm,
want to read about more real life, realistic problems that we're grappling with today. They see it on the news, maybe they're immersed in it. They just don't, and I respect that, right? And also with my books, it's different when you write this from the first person perspective for the most part of a character who is bigoted. You're in their head, you hear these thoughts there, you can't run away and hide from it.
yeah.
So whereas it's not that detached third person omnipotent, we're back here, and then there's 6 other povs, and you can skip, or it'll be a while till you get back to that. No, he is the lion's share of the narrative. So and that's purposeful. So you can't get away from it. And that for a lot of people, that I understand why that can be tough. But again, it is purposeful. And as a writer, you learn that, you the more you stay true to your craft, the more I think you also find your audience, for good or ill. And there's some people that, hey, this is for me. That's fine. I'm on to something else. And for some people, you know what, I find this compelling and I'm going to keep reading to see and find out what happens. Will this character change? What's going to happen? Will he survive? Like, so I think, I'm much better at accepting now that, and, I'm certainly not tone deaf to criticism like you, like all authors. I think we very much are trying to improve with every book that we write. We're trying to get better. And of course, I'm the same. And I'm not tone deaf to criticism and not tone deaf to what people might potentially say about my writing. However, at the same time, I do plan to write my story the way I believe it should be written, just as you are, just as we all are. And I think that I wouldn't be me if I didn't write about this stuff, because that's one of the reasons I write. So
Yeah, we all have engines within us that are driving us to talk and write about certain things. That there is cozy fantasy out there. You can read your legends and lattes, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with comfortable books that are nice and just fun and light and fluffy in any genre, and fantasy is no exception. There's a huge spectrum of subgenres now we now have, and more all the time cropping up. Like romantasy is a new growing genre. The name itself gives you a strong indication of what you're going to get. People know, and that's what they want, and that's fine. But for me, like you, I think I want to write about certain things in particular that some readers will find uncomfortable and difficult. So choosing to write first person, have you found it limiting in any way? Are there other points like you're thinking, oh, I want to go over there and talk about this, and like, oh, I can't because suddenly I'm in first person. So I haven't done first person in a full novel. That's one of my concerns, is that if I suddenly think, oh, I need to go over and talk about this thing or do about that, how do I get the information to the character so that it doesn't sound too convenient? Like, oh, bird arrived. Oh, just when I needed that information. That's useful. Oh, yes, I shall read out the letter that gives the information that I need for the plot. So have you had any problems with first person? Have you occasionally thought, I wish I could go over there and do a thing?
It's funny you say that, Stephen. That's an excellent. I love that question. That's an excellent question. So what I do is that, again, first person, my main character, he does the lion's share of the perspectives throughout the entire series. However, I strategically insert at times other first person narratives, and I also strategically insert at times third person narratives. But for the most part, the choice of first person was very strategic, because I don't want you to see certain things, and I want you to think
That's another
this
good
guy's
reason to do it. Yes.
I want you to think this guy's an unreliable narrator. Is what he's telling me here really true? Like, I don't get to see the other side here.
Mm-hmm.
And while, again, that may be something that's frustrating for the reader sometimes, I think that readers are very intelligent. They know that there's a reason why I'm only seeing this. And then at some point, I see this perspective. Well, surely there's a reason behind the author is doing this purposefully. So I play with it a lot. And as the series progresses, there are more and more other perspectives sprinkled in,
Mm-hmm.
and not just other third person perspectives, but other first person perspectives. So, but the initial book is all exclusively one first person narrative. But as soon as you read the second book, you see another first person narrative for a few chapters. The third book, you get third person, you get a different first person perspective for a couple chapters, and it goes on from there. So I mix and match to keep you off balance, to keep you guessing about what's really going on. Did this thing really happen? Is this magical? Is the character mad? Is this all illusion? Is he having visions? Is he imagining that? Like, what, especially when it comes to the magic system, there's a lot of things that seem very ambiguous, and I do that very purposefully.
That's a good answer. Yes, yes. Sometimes you want to keep things from the reader. So my next question you touched on there is magic system. Tell me about, some people have light magic systems, very kind of gentle, and some have like structured right down to the nth degree. Tell me about the magic system in your world, what you can without spoilers, And you know, how much detail have you planned into the creating it?
Well, I'll be the first to say that for a lot of people, especially those who are fans of hard magic systems, and I have nothing against them, I definitely prefer soft magic systems. You
Hmm.
may find things very airy fairy at first. You may find things very, and it's funny. I've written blogs about this. That you know, I'm old. I have a gray beard here. I'm a grandfather, and I was the books that I read, uh, for the most part, there were no hard magic systems. You don't know why Gandalf waves his staff and this
You
happens. You
don't
don't know
need
what,
to. You don't need to
yeah,
know.
you don't know what the consequences are when he uses this much magic. You don't know. I mean, there's so much is just left totally vague. But I would argue that it doesn't lessen your enjoyment of these reading those kinds of books whatsoever.
No.
Um, but that said, part of it may be, and perhaps it's generational, but perhaps I'm oversimplifying it here, and I'm certainly don't want to overgeneralize either. That I find that as the generations move on, I think there's a thirst for it's that thirst for knowledge. Like I need to know how this works. I need to know how this works down to nth degree. I need to know what the consequences are. I need to know who can use it, when can they use it, what the repercussions are. Like there's definitely this is an age thing. A lot of people they want something more akin to a rational, almost scientific explanation for what is behind the magic. And for me, that and again, I've read hard magic fancy books that I've loved, and I've really appreciate the thought and the intellect sort of that goes into designing this stuff down to nth degree. I mean, when I'm not a huge Brandon Sanderson reader, but when you read his books, you realize the depth and breadth and the intricacy to which he's planned
Mm.
his magic system down to the it's phenomenal. It is essentially like science, right? But that's not how I write. And that's not as much what I enjoy to read. So you may find it very light and airy for it first, but again, there's reason behind that. I want it to be very ambiguous. I want you to even question if magic even exists at all, and this is just all in the character's head for a large portion of the series. And it's until later you get a sense of how much is in his head, perhaps how much he's seeing it, and how much is actually real or not. So that's how I write it, and that's how it manifests in the world. You see it predominantly through the main character's eyes. You're seeing these things happen. You're like, is this really, really what's happening? And without any validation from other characters to say, oh no, this is happening, or oh, my friend, maybe you're off your rocker. It's there's a lot of that.
Mm.
And again, it's I don't reveal everything right away. It comes out in bits and pieces throughout the series.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think not knowing how Gandalf does everything hasn't changed my view. I don't need to know absolutely everything. There are costs, there are limits. We see him lose, we see him fail, we see him die. He can't just do anything all of the time. Otherwise, magic just becomes a get out of jail free card for any situation. And it never is. There always has to be a cost. But knowing everything right down to the finite detail, I find that boring and tedious because it robs me as the reader as some of the spark of the excitement, the kind of, if I know A plus B equals C every single time, it's like, well, it's just boring now. It's just tedious and repetitive. So I want that mystery. I want that excitement, and I want that kind of sense of wonder. And I think explaining magic systems all, such detail, it's not for me. I don't find it fun at all. I don't think it robs the reader or anything, but it comes down to personal taste, as you say. Um, yeah, this goes around a lot. People have very strong opinions on magic systems. It's a real thing for sure. So
Yes, it's very divisive, but you know what? People are entitled to like what they like. So,
Mhm.
if you like hard magic systems, fantastic. If you are someone who cannot enjoy perhaps a book that doesn't have that, probably my book isn't for you. But if you don't care either way, you appreciate hard magic systems and you don't mind if they're soft and more airy fairy, then I say give it a shot.
Mm. I think also having something that is revealed gradually over time is rewarding for long-time readers. Um, Seeing the evolution of characters, but equally finding information out as you go on, and the penny drops suddenly, and you go, after a certain number of books, those are some of the most rewarding moments for me as a reader, I think. So were you planning these things in your head when you were working and going, I could reveal this thing at this point, and then the reader who's been reading on 1, 2, and 3 gets to 4 and goes, oh God, and then suddenly all clicks in. So have you been dropping little kind of seeds all the way through the series?
Yep, I love books with Easter eggs. I love Easter eggs, period, as a reader.
Mm.
I love those moments of revelation. Oh my God, that's what that meant. I love that. That's how I write. This book in particular, my most recent book, Alliance Pride, this is that watershed book where a lot of the mysteries, not all of them, but a lot of the mysteries people were wondering about, they get revealed, they come to fruition. And a lot of readers have been like, I cannot believe this is what this was about all along. I can't believe this happened. You know, I do my best to, I mean, readers are intelligent. You can't pull the wool over their eyes on everything. There's people who have predicted certain things I've tried to keep hidden and said, oh, yeah, and they've guessed it. I haven't told them that until they've read a certain book. Because now they can say, oh, I was right. I was right all along. But sometimes they've made extremely educated guesses and they've been incorrect. So, and it's fun when people email you or message you say, I have a theory about this. I think this is what's going on. And sometimes, oh my gosh, they're right. And I'm like, ooh, but I can't say anything. And sometimes they're
It's a
way
good
off base.
guess.
Yeah. And sometimes they're way off base. It doesn't mean it wasn't a great guess. It just means that it wasn't how I wrote it. So I love that. And I love this book in particular in that this is the book where, and I wrote this in the afterward, that the most fun about writing this book is that I get to reveal so many of these things that I know people have been wondering about in this book, and it's made writing this so much fun.
So you're still enjoying it. You know, you're 4 books in, you're working on book 5 now. Are you still having fun, given how long you've been planning all of this?
I am having so much fun, Stephen. I think I don't know how your writing journey was. I think we've talked a bit about it when you're on page chewing. You know, I know details about it, but I'm not can't remember if I asked you this question.
Mm.
So I know that for me specifically, I'd love to hear what you think. For me, writing the 7 book series, book 2 was the hard one, and it was only hard for really one reason. I was struggling with imposter syndrome. I was
Ah,
struggling with, the first book is out finally. So your first published book, people have opinions, some like it, some don't. Overall, the reviews are very positive. You know, people seem to be enjoying it. They may not like this, they may not like this. However, overall, so now you've built up somewhat a very modest, very modest following. And people are waiting with anticipation about the next book, especially since I left book 1 on somewhat of a cliffhanger, which is one of those rules they say in writing never do. But I'm an indie author. Ha, ha ha ha, we take chances, we do what we want to do, basically. And I said another cliffhanger. So there was a lot. I felt this enormous pressure, only put on by myself, really.
right.
That wow, I have to make this so much better than the first book, instead of just focusing on writing a good book. So, and eventually I got to the point where I'm just focused on writing this thing, and the people say what they say. But so that book was hard to write. Excuse me. And it wasn't because it was a particularly hard book to write per se. It was because of the pressure. But after that, after I got over book 2, it's been just flowing. It's been fun. And this book, like I said, Lies Pride, I loved it because I got to tell, you were wondering about that before. Well, this is what happened. I kind of got to let loose a bit with some things in this book. And this is by far the longest book. It's 600 pages, and it's going to be the longest book of the series, and the other ones will continue to be shorter. Like, for example, the first book was only 400 pages, so it's the biggest book in the series. It's got the most reveals so far, and there will continue to be reveals, obviously, throughout the series. But this is the one where you have so many reveals packed into one book that it's like a lot of shocks to the system, and I love that. And it's fun. And what's been the most fun about writing this series, I think, is besides the main character, seeing him actually grow on people, and like you said in the beginning, seeing that he is a real person with all these faults and issues. However, there are good parts of him, and but to see him grow, to see him age a bit, to see him, I think it's been a very rewarding experience, and that I've seen readers grow with him, and that I've grown with him, and he's grown on me. And so have all the other characters, right? So and it's fun to see all the predicaments that he's been thrust in, things that he's dealt with. And yeah, at this point, I'm just having a lot of fun, and I can't wait for book 5. Book 4 also had a lot of intense battles, and I think in my books I've kind of escalated. Like, it starts off, book 1 is much more like smaller skirmishes and smaller battles and one-on-one. There's only really 2 really battle scenes in the whole book, and then book 2 has much more. Book 2 has a lot of, especially the middle part, a lot of intense action, and then but it's still like part of the peak. And then book 3 is more spread out. The action sequences are more spread out, and there's big lulls. But then at the end, it's a big bang. And then book 4 has pretty, not too long after things really start off with the action. Then there's another huge battle pretty well in the middle, more dual stuff, and then a humongous battle at the end. So that's been all fun throughout. And like you said, it's not all about action, it's not about battles, it's not about, but battles are something especially I want to quickly talk about. I never thought I'd be good at writing battle scenes. I'm not saying that I am. I'm just saying that I never thought it'd be something that people would acknowledge me for, and a lot of people seem to really enjoy the way I write battle scenes. And I look at the Miles Camerons, people like you, the Evan Winters, the Evan Winters, the Bernard Cornwells, and I go, I will never come close to eclipsing what they write, right? But I do my best, right? And it's turned out well. Like, I thought people would acknowledge me for my world building, because I'd like to think hopefully it's a strength, because I never really put a lot of effort into that.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that it is. It just means that's how I feel about it. But people seem to really enjoy my battle scenes, and I think that's a fun thing. And now I'm starting to have fun writing them. Because before it was just something I wrote, but now I'm starting to have fun writing them and kind of playing with a bit. So it's kind of cool.
Well, now you have an audience. Now you have people that are waiting for the next book. Now you have people, hoping to make their predictions come true and find out if they're right or not. So you obviously, I was saying the main character changes and evolves over the course of this series. Have you had readers initially sort of say, "Oh, I really don't like the main character," and later on they come back to you and said, "You're starting to grow on me now"?
It's funny you say that, Stephen. I've had a lot of reviews like that. I think what's happened is, again, it's a reviewer recently said he just got the book too, and I saw his review, and he's like, you know what, I need to learn to trust the process with this author, because he's proven himself that he knows how to reward you when you're dubious about why he's writing this, or why he's writing this way, or why he's putting detail to this. I'm starting to see why. So, now I'm kind of invested. And with the main character, I know that for a lot of people, it's hard to be in his head, like I said, and hear those things in the way he thinks all the times.
Yeah.
Even when he's being, on the other hand, chivalrous and magnanimous and, and noble. But then you have these horrible things in the horrible way, things that he says and does. But I think people are starting to understand that, as you aptly pointed out, he's a real person, and he's multifaceted. He's not just noble, end of story, full stop. He's not Aragorn. You know what I mean? He's not Aragorn, right? He is, and I think that it is something that I feel very proud that I've tried to portray him in a realistic fashion, and that for some people he is definitely grown on them, and some people have actually come to like him, as horrible as he can be sometimes. I think they see the gold underneath the tarnish, and I think that they're a lot of people become invested in him, and that makes me so happy, and I'm very honored that people have said. And a lot of people have read book 1, told me front, I cannot read about this guy anymore. I'm tapping out. I respect that. It's not for everybody, and they can find books that they enjoy, and I understand that. But for the people who have continued with the series and stuck with it, I want to say thank you. I'm doing my best to improve as a writer, and I thank you for coming along with the journey and trusting the process and trusting what I'm doing with this character. I'd like to think that by the end of the series, because you've trusted me, you're going to be rewarded, and that the ending will be that much more satisfying. So
yeah, and the fact that you have planned all of this, you've got it all laid out, it's all there. You're not going to do a Lost, like the TV series, where they just didn't have a clue how it was going to end and were like, oh, we'll just make something up. Yeah, that'll do. And then they just it ended terribly, or the final season of Game of Thrones, the last few episodes, everyone complains about, like, it just felt that they dropped the ball. They didn't really have it all thought out. So you have done all the work, you have done all the planning, you have got the notes down to who you're going to have for a cover quote for book 7. So readers should trust that you've done the work and that you're delivering, because you've had 4 books out in 4 years. And so, they need to trust the process. So
Well, thank you. And I have to say, and this as a writer, Stefan, that you get to a point where you're very comfortable about who's going to enjoy your book and what audience you have. And you're not writing everybody. We talked about this before we came on. Everybody wants more sales. All writers would love to sell more. All writers would love to, become sell millions and millions of copies and have that acclaim, etc. You'd love to win tons of writing awards, etc. Despite how controversial all those awards seem
at
recently.
the moment, yes,
yes, everybody wants to see this. However, what happens is you get very comfortable with you always are striving for continuous improvement in your writing. You're not competing against other writers. You're supporting other writers. You want them to succeed. You want them to sell millions of copies. I love the community because it's so supportive, and you're always boosting each other. And because that you have your audience and people will love your books that absolutely despise mine, and vice versa, for whatever reasons, right? Because like you said, it's all subjective.
Yeah.
So you're happy. What you're looking for is to find more people who would like the type of book that you write, and get them to see your book, and that hopefully they like it, and they will tell friends that also like the same sort of thing. But yeah, I'm a lot more comfortable in that, and I write because this is a story that's inside me, needs to get out. And like I said, I'm having a lot more fun with it now than I ever have. And I just want to keep writing. And I'm looking forward to, I'm not looking too far ahead, although I am not anxious, but I'm eager to complete the series because I have so many things to write too, besides the series. So, in the same universe. And I think that the other series hopefully will be equally, if not more compelling than this one, because I will have hopefully gotten better as a writer. So, like I know, for example, I absolutely love The Coward. It's a book that I read. It's a book that I rave about, and I tell a lot of people about.
Thank
but
you.
boy, Judas Blossom, wow, that was incredible. And I haven't gotten a review out yet, but oh my gosh, that was amazing. And thanks for the honor of letting me interview you about Judas Blossom.
No, of course.
But yeah, I'd like to think that the way, and as writers, we have our babies, we have our favorites, right?
Yeah.
Some readers may love this series, but we're like, yeah, it's good, but I really love the other series I wrote. But I think the Drowned Kingdom will always have a special place in my heart, especially as my first one.
Yeah. Well, you've done 4. You're working on 5. You're past the hump now. You've got the next 3. You're on the downhill slope, even though it's still some books. But you're on the downhill slope now towards the end. So people need to trust that you are going to deliver the rest. So I'm going to put links down below so people can find where to get your books and to pick up Lion's Pride, the book 4, which has just come out. But thank you for coming on, and thank you for telling me about the world and the characters and everything that you created. And I'll see you in person, not just through the screen, in person in Glasgow in August at Worldcon. So that'll be fantastic.
First drinks on me, my friend. I can't wait.
Fantastic. All right. Good night, everybody. Good night.
Take care. Good night.